This is ContraZoom, where we go back and forth about film. My name is Jeff Bomer, and I recently had the wonderful opportunity to interview Alireza Khatami, the director of The Things You Kill. The Things You Kill is a Turkish language film that was recently selected as Canada's submission to the Best International Feature Oscar at this year's Academy Awards. It's a very unique film. There's quite a lot going on in it, and it was just a wonderful pleasure to pick Ali Reza's brain a little bit about this. For those of you who have seen it, or I guess for those of you who have not, this is a film about doppelgangers. It's a film about family and sort of about, living with trauma and living with potentially having done very violent things. And so we talk about that quite a bit. We talk about the presence of translation, the sort of themes of what it takes to adapt something in that comes up very explicitly in this film. We also talked quite a bit about a maybe for those of you who've seen it, probably fairly obvious point of comparison, but maybe a surprising point of comparison at the same time. We talked a little bit about David Fincher's Fight Club and about some of the interesting directorial choices that Ali Reza makes that, initially some of his collaborators maybe even didn't fully understand until they were actually executed. Anyway, it was a great interview, and I am very excited for you to hear it. Without further ado, here is my interview with Alireza Khatami. Hello, my name is Jeff Bomer for ContraZoom Pod, and I am here today with Alireza Khatami, the director of the film The Things You Kill, which releases this weekend, at least as of this recording. I hope this comes out this weekend as well. Uh, Alireza, nice to have you on. Thank you for chatting with me.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me and giving me a chance to chat.
First off, congratulations on your film. I just watched this. It is Um, I watched it very recently, so I can't say yet that it has had the chance to stick with me, but I know that it will because this is a very unique film. It's very strange, and there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about that I'm very excited to just pick your brain about. Um, but I guess for people who have not yet seen it, in the things you kill is about a character named Ali who, after the death of his mother, suspects that I guess not all may be quite as it seems um, with his family and with the situation. I guess I'm being very, very vague because there is quite a lot that goes on in this movie. But I wanted to ask a little bit about how this movie came to be.
I was struggling to deal with my own personal histories and understand what has happened to me.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I was working on a book adaptation. Uh, as I was writing a scene for that script, I started writing about two friends who were hanging out in a garden. And soon I realized that for me, it's a way of talking to myself. The two friends are an opportunity for me to talk to myself. Soon, my sisters arrived to the story, and then my mom is in the story, and my dad is in the story. And I had to stop and ask myself, can I show this to anybody? This is becoming too personal now.
Hmm.
And I had never written something so personal. So I said I will finish the script, but I never show it to anyone. Once I finished it, I sent it to a friend who is not in cinema to read it and give me some feedback. And they called me 1 a.m. in the morning crying. And then I realized, okay, it's not my pain alone anymore, and I have to find a way to put it out. And how that movie started 9 years ago.
There is something that really stuck with me from a scene fairly early on in this movie. Your character Ali is he's a professor and he teaches translation at a Turkish university. And very early on, he's talking about the roots of the word translate. First,
Yeah.
in English, coming from Latin, there's the translatus, trans being across, latus being carrying, so to carry it across, like to carry that meaning across. Then he talks about the root of the Turkish word from the Akkadian. I believe it's targumanu, which is to explain or interpret, but he quickly shuts down one student who is introduced as being on her phone, but she points out that there is another Arabic root, rajam, which means to stone or to curse or to kill. And he quickly shuts that down, even though, I mean, I think that's really quite an interesting addition there. And I think I wanted to talk a little bit about that scene and just how you
Yeah.
incorporate translation and interpretation into this movie.
So Ali is a comparative literature professor.
Mm,
He knows the root of the word is not coming from rajam, which is to kill. That's
mm,
not correct. The student is absolutely wrong. That's why he shuts down the student,
mm.
which he has to do as a quote unquote good professor. But by end of the film, he has come to a new understanding of what it means to translate the world for himself. Then he goes back to the students and instead of shutting her down, he says, let's assume that your interpretation, even though wrong, let's assume is right. How would we understand a world with that reading?
Mm.
And that opens up a new possibility of interpreting the world for himself. It is to kill something and decide what that thing is, the things you kill. And Ali has come around to understand the things to kill lives in the mirror.
Um,
And the
oh,
transformation begins from the mirror.
you've brought up a couple of things that I think I maybe am dancing around here in maybe an attempt to avoid spoilers, but I think it's
Well,
about
you
time to
can
get to
spoil the
it.
film.
I would love to. I think
No,
I
yeah,
think
you can
that
totally spoil the film. I don't think it's a movie about spoiling, even though knowing what happens gonna hit you hard, you
mm,
know? And we designed the movie not to be expired in first watch.
mhm.
Even in second watch and even in third watch, the movie still holds. So don't worry about spoilers. Spoilers.
So you mentioned the mirror, and you mentioned as well that Ali later comes back and talks to the student and to, explore that idea. But in the scene where Ali is exploring that idea with the student, it's not actually Ali, it's another character, Reza, who enters the film probably about a third of the way in, and then in the second act of the film fully assumes Ali's life. It was a moment that caught me completely off guard. I didn't know what to expect going into this movie, and I had the luxury of having a screener for this movie, so I was able to rewind a bit, and I had to do that a few times to see if I was really understanding correctly what was going on screen. It's a really jarring moment where Ali is just replaced by Reza, and no one notices, or at least no one acknowledges it.
I mean, in the tradition of doppelganger movies, you know, the duality in cinema usually is about a character who imagines his double. And somewhere down the road, end of Act Two, through a series of flashbacks, we explain that the double never existed.
Mhm.
This is Fight Club, right?
Right.
That's how it happened. So I didn't want to go that path. I wanted to push it one step further. What if the second character is not imagination, but has full agency? You know, the destructive side is so potent that you cannot just reduce it to domain of fantasy. Right?
Mhm.
That was the guiding principle for us. So we said, we'll move the audience halfway through the film, and then we pull the rug from beneath them and let them be disoriented for 10, 15 seconds till they find their footing again. And if they don't leave the cinema, they have given us the consent that they are willing to go to uncharted territories with us. And that's how we take them to the ending of the film.
And I think that's I like the comparison to Fight Club because I actually think that uh, the relationship between Ali and Reza is basically nothing at all like the relationship between the central characters in Fight Club. But it's an interesting point of comparison because Tyler Durden in that movie, he's he's everything that the unnamed protagonist wants to be, and that person that he is very violent, very a very misguided idea of what this protagonist actually should be. But he's very violent. He's a man of action. He, gets things done. Just looking back, probably not in the way that they should have potentially been done. But I think that Reza is, I guess, similarly everything that Ali wants to be. But when I say that Reza is a man of action, he's not someone who he's not violent in that way. He's confident. Actually, Ali is more of a violent personality and struggles to get anything done. Where Reza, he'll confront problems in a very sober, very mature way, and sometimes stuff gets done, sometimes it doesn't, but he's, doing what he's pushing forward. He's doing what needs to what needs to be done at every given point, and just expressing, the agency that Ali seems to have trouble expressing.
It's about the difference in approaches that David Fincher takes
Mm,
and the approach that I take. In my case, I'm using the destructive side to show that simple narratives collapse despite all efforts. That's the way I use it. And my film,
mm,
first of all, is many years after Fight Club,
mm,
so it could take that conversation one step forward, right? So my character is a bit more nuanced than the Brad Pitt character in Fight Club.
mm,
That's very, very uh, kind of fantastic element is present there.
mm.
But here it's more of a psychological and realistic element persist in the things we kill. So I think it's a they're very similar in many ways, structurally, but then the execution, we we chose these tools and used it in different manners.
I wanted to
Yeah.
actually go back a little bit to talking about the translation element of this because
Yeah.
this movie is in Turkish.
Mhm.
Um, and when I was reading some earlier interviews that you've done and watching back some interviews, it wasn't always in Turkish. So I wanted to ask sort of how this went from its original Farsi version into why did it become Turkish?
The censorship office in Iran asked us to change the script, and I
Mhm,
refused to change it. So I speak a dialect of Turkish from southwest of Iran because I'm an indigenous person from that area. And that gave me an entry window to Turkey. And the Turkish artists were very generous to, in a way, adopt me and adopt this story. And we went there and completely killed the Iranian version and resurrected the soul of the film in the Turkish landscape. So the very act of translation as it is described in the film happened to us during the production. So we had to let go of one film in order to find this movie.
That is something that I've heard you say in a few other interviews that was really sticking with me because of that conversation that we talked about earlier, just bringing the idea of killing something into the act of translation. I think it's really interesting that there is there is a version of this story, or not, this story is very personal, and the original version of it kind of had to die in order for this new version, which is equally personal but completely different in many ways, to sort of exist as the same story. There's a shot later on in the movie after Ali has taken back his life, I want to say, in
Mhm.
for better or worse. Well, not for better or worse. After Ali has taken back his life, he has he has a monologue where I believe his boss, the dean
Yeah.
of the school, has just talked to him, and he starts to, open up about his past and his past relationship with his father. And this monologue is shot mostly out of focus right until the end, which struck me as a very strange choice seeing it, because at the very beginning of the shot, it's, he's a little bit blurry, and I'm thinking, oh, it's just about to get back in focus, but it never does, which I thought, or it does very, very close to the end of the monologue. And I wanted to ask a little bit about that choice. You've mentioned in some other interviews that I read that, some of your collaborators would see some of your directorial choices and uh, maybe before seeing them in action would just be like that those are wrong. I don't understand why you would do that. And so I was wondering if that was one of those.
This was the most contentious one.
Okay.
Usually in cinema, we rarely use out of focus.
Hmm.
You know, there are examples. For example, in the movie Graduate, the focus puller was a second late, but that delay in pulling focus created one of the most beautiful moments of the film. Out of focus became realization. Focus became realization, and out of focus became thinking.
Hmm.
So I took that structure and I added yet another element to it, which is privacy. So my character is about to explain to an absolute random stranger, almost, his
Hmm.
colleague, the most private confession of his life. So I wanted to provide my character with a private space that you cannot see his eyes. Even though he's giving you a confession, you cannot see his eyes. So I needed to give him privacy. And also, this is first time he's recounting that story for himself. So he is in the fog.
Hmm.
Fog, out of focus, very similar visual experience. Then I thought, all right, as soon as he starts recounting the story, we stay in the fog with him. And as soon as things clicks for him and he comes to a realization, we come to focus. You know, uh, my cinematographer was a little bit, uh, questioning this,
Hmm.
but soon they came on board and we shot it. Producer asked if we have a clean shot as well, and I never did that. So
Oh, good.
this is what we have.
I like the confidence of not doing the alternative take just in case.
If you give yourself the safe choice, you always go to the safe choice.
Hmm. And then another there was one other shot that um I've noticed going back to this film that I think I may have only caught I think it's two shots mirrored, but I think I may have only caught one of them right at the end, or right near where, right after Ali regains his life from Reza. He pretty violently kills Reza and then walks back to his farm. And that scene, we see him walking towards the camera, and then he stops, and the camera keeps zooming out, and you see that he was that, and you see that uh, him reflected in a mirror. So
Yeah,
it's like he's walking out of that mirror. And
yeah.
I think I may have missed the initial. I think I may have missed a shot earlier on, uh, maybe where was Reza? Does Reza have a similar scene early on that I missed where he's walking
Early on,
into a mirror?
when Reza arrives, we see him arriving in the mirror.
Okay,
And then with Reza, we dive into the mirror. When Reza
okay.
dies, we come out of the mirror. So the entire second act of the film, the main chunk of the film,
Mhm.
happens in that reflection.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say when I was watching the movie, I noticed that, when he stops and when he stops to look in that mirror and we get that view of him looking in the mirror, it feels like he's exiting that mirror, like he's been trapped in there for a long time. And I guess
Yeah,
he's literally has been, or
yes.
with for the second act of the movie. Um, there's one other quote. I'm jumping around all over the place here, but there's one other quote that it starts off the movie and it also ends the movie. And I wanted to ask you about it. Uh Early on, Ali is talking to his wife Hazar, and she has had a dream where she saw his father, and his father said, "Kill the light." And I don't think at first it doesn't strike us as very strange because, that's a way you might say turn off the light. But she says, no, he would never say that. He would say turn off the light. But he said specifically kill the light. And then at the very end, we sort of see that dream play out again. And it's very strange. He comes in, he sits down, and he says, kill the light. And then we hear another knock on the door. And I think I think I keep coming back to that one student who said, no, this word derives from the word for kill. And she's wrong, but throughout the movie, we're reckoning with, well, what does this act of adaptation mean? And specifically, we keep coming back to the use of that one specific word, kill, over and over again. And I thought, what was the idea to start the movie with this? Did that come early on in the movie? Can you tell us a little bit more about that scene?
I wrote the entire film for that last scene. Everything else is is built as a structure for that scene to work, right? Uh,
Mhm.
and that's the moment of reckoning for the character. And that's to me the way I can put it without completely revealing my own hand to the audience is the act of translation has a cost.
Mhm.
The end scene is about the cost. The end scene is about the possibility of being open to the ghosts. We should not live in houses without a ghost. We did that, and the residential school tragedies happened in Canada. If we had lived with the ghosts of the past, if we had remembered what we have done to these nations here, we wouldn't have repeated it. So Ali has to learn that a great house is a haunted one.
I think that is actually about all the time that I have. But thank you so
Thank you so
much,
much.
Alireza
Thank you, Jeff.
Khatami. And The Things You Kill is now in theaters. Please go see it. Go see it in a theater. Like I said, I saw it as a screener. I'm going to go see it again in a theater because it's one that very much welcomes repeated viewings, and I am excited to see it a second time. So thank you so much
Thank you
for
so
your
much,
film.
Jeff, for having me. Have a wonderful day.